Support for the Pursuit of Music podcast is brought to you by Brooke Mays Music. Brooke Mays Music is a family of retail specialists who unify their professional skills and talents in order to focus on the needs of music education and educators. Their main goal is to increase the number of active instrumental music makers. Their objectives include, number 1, maintain strong working relationships for the lifespan of the music maker's career, and number 2, encourage the love and participation in music, and finally, number 3, being an active advocate for support of music in the schools. The voice of music education drives our actions. Thank you so much to our sponsors, Brooke Mays Music.
Socratic Method.
Socratic Method.
What is the Socratic Method?
It's the method created by Socrates.
Right. Can you delve a little deeper into that?
Well, it's the idea of asking leading questions so that you try to find truth and insights in a topic. I mean, really, that's all it is.
What the only person I've heard a few people use the Socratic Method, and they kind of use it as a way to pin their adversary into a corner, like a logical corner. So,
well, the Socratic Method is really tied into the study of logic, but also in the study of rhetoric. So that makes a lot of sense because logic is about making good arguments, and then rhetoric is some people criticize rhetoric by saying that it's a bunch of tricks to try to make people believe what you want them to believe.
Okay.
So I could definitely see people doing that with the Socratic Method.
I don't know that if you're solidified in what you believe, then it's hard to be tricked. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think I could use any topic about even what you believe about trumpet playing. I couldn't take it and spin it in a way where I'm like, ha, gotcha.
Well, I mean, it's the idea of investigating things from all angles. So if you haven't done that on a particular issue, I can potentially fire at a bunch of directions and get you to start questioning what you believe, which is an important part of the learning process.
But it's not a bunch of what ifs, or is it a bunch of what ifs?
Well, what ifs those are pretty bad questions because those are extenuating circumstances. So a true Socratic person, I don't think goes into the what ifs.
Yeah, I wouldn't, because that's kind of, it makes an argument get really, really, really annoying.
Right.
Just on all fronts. I think that when I start hearing what about this super, super specific scenario that you've probably already thought of? And it's like, well, I think whenever we talk about overarching concepts, or, if we're talking politics or whatever, then we're talking about the general masses of situations. Like, obviously, there's always examples that you come up with of like, hey, this specific example. I know one guy who did this, and this, but whenever I get into that place in an argument, I go, hey, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the general populace,
right?
The general population. Right. So
yeah, I try my hardest to not do the what if questions. No, I fail at that all the time. But
right, yeah,
because they're not great questions.
I think particularly if about to sneeze.
Bless you.
So I think particularly if I've gone through it, so if somebody's talking to me, or talking to you about weight loss, and they say something about, hey, you have to only eat chicken, greens, and this, and your first instinct, I think, will be like, well, wait, I have a lived experience about that,
right?
And you'll go, oh, but the way you do it is like, oh, and I think you'll entertain them, and you go, well, I lost 40 pounds going to McDonald's. You'll say some power statement like that.
I've lost all sorts of weight going to McDonald's.
Yeah. I was looking up the calories on it last night. It's 90 calories, no carbs for a beef patty.
Yeah.
At McDonald's. So we're not advocating for it, but you might see us in the drive-thru.
I mean, I'll advocate for it. That's
It's food.
I'm not going to do a commercial for them because they're not a sponsor. But are we recording?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
We've been, I think, since we started talking about the Socratic Method.
Oh, so man, that is a sexy start to a podcast.
Yeah, it is. What's up?
Oh, do you think that there is such thing as a bad question?
I think, in my opinion, loaded questions are bad questions. So does that count?
Do you think there's such thing as a good question?
Yes.
So if there's a good question, is there a bad question?
Yes.
I hate the saying there are no bad questions. It's like bull honky.
Bull honky. Yeah.
I, being a teacher, I've heard lots of bad questions.
Right. I think that you could explain it. I think the problem is the way that we talk about it.
Right.
And obviously the end goal of saying the phrase that there are no such thing as bad questions is that you don't want the kid's first thought to be, I'm going to sound stupid when I ask this question.
Right. You want them to ask questions, but then the guiding should be to teach them how to ask better questions.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good life skill.
Yeah.
Asking good questions. So, gosh, yeah, I've gotten some really, really bad questions, not only in school, but as an organizer of a crew of work people. You know, I'll get people who will call in and say, hey, there are 2 bags, but one's outside of the can. Should I take them? Yes.
Yes.
Yes, you should. Just click. So, yeah, absolutely. There's bad questions. But I don't, even if you do hear a bad question, I think it behooves you as a person to maybe not make them feel so stupid about it.
Yeah, that's just being a good person.
And then after they're done, like walk them off to the side and go, hey, Johnny, listen.
Well, and I think that's the value of teaching Socratically, is that you're getting people to just ask better questions because you're leading the example.
Right.
But I guess the first thing is that a teacher they themselves need to learn to ask good questions, which
I think that just comes with experience.
Comes with experience, a thought, being able to put some thought into what you're doing before you do it.
The issue that I have with the Socratic Method is that I think it works really well, but as an adult, it feels a little childish when somebody starts doing the Socratic Method on me. But I think teacher to student, I think it would be fine.
Well, I don't... Man, my voice is cracking all over the place.
Good morning, Dallas.
It's like I'm going through puberty for the 9th time. Anyway.
Lucky number 9. All right, here we go.
Oh, I don't think that... okay, so when you read Plato, gosh, this is as exciting as it gets. Holy crap. When you're reading Plato, he did all the dialogues of Socrates. Socrates is just talking with general people. But I don't think that is actually meant for like when we're talking and just kind of shooting the breeze. I think it's actually meant for education because that's what Socrates was after, is getting people to think, Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what we're after every day when we're teaching is like, hey, I just want you to think for yourself.
Right.
And just use your own brain because you have a brain, I have a brain. So a lot of the times in my lessons, I'll ask people, it's one of my favorite questions to ask, like, hey, if I played that for you, would you be impressed or would you ask what's wrong with me today?
Right.
Right? And they'll go, I would ask you what's wrong. Like, so why is it okay for you to play that, but it's not okay for me to play that?
Yeah.
Oh, it's because you have standards for me. Okay, so you need to start setting standards for yourself.
Yeah.
But anyway, so no guests today, but we do have a slew of guests coming up, and the way that we're going to do it is we're going to record whenever the guest can make it, and then we're going to release it every Wednesday until Kingdom Come. I don't know.
Until the kingdom comes.
Until, yeah.
Which king? I didn't realize this was going to stump you.
I'm trying to think of all the kings that I can think of.
Or something witty.
I was trying to come up with witty and clever, yeah.
It's King Bob.
King Bob. King's Bob Burgers. Yeah. So today, I think.
Who's the guy that Brandon Holt always talks about? Is it Jim Bob Biggers? Is that the name?
I have no idea. You must be closer with him than I am.
He has this friend from high school because he grew up in Oklahoma. This guy named, and he's always referring to him, Jim Bob Biggers.
Is that a name? That's a real thing?
It's a real name. The guy always had a brown spot on the back of his pants. So, yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Brandon's from a really sophisticated area of the country.
Jeez.
With good old Jim Bob Biggers.
Yeah. I love whenever you go, like, so I was talking with Bill Zier, BZ, he's the marching tech for Prosper. This was a while back, but he was telling me what town he was from, and he did call it a town. I'm fascinated just by geography in the United States, trying to find out where all the small towns are and stuff. And so I'm looked up where this one is, and it's always great whenever you look up a town, and there's one road traveling east-west, and then one road traveling north-south, and then there's like a cluster of streets that look like this.
Yeah.
Where they're just like it's like a little mini net. I'm like, wow, you are from a small town, small town.
I when you're going on road trips, I always try to imagine what would it be like to live there.
Yes, and it's funny because you can go down 80 east, which goes towards Tyler and Longview and all those kind of stuff, those cities. And those are small towns, but like you talk to the people in those towns, like Grand Saline, Mineola, Hawkins is where my dad has property. You talk to those folks, and dude, they're not even small towns. They're like, we've got 3,000 people. I don't know what you're talking about, and it's like, but they talk about towns that have like 300, 200. It's like, man, I wouldn't even know. What do you do? Because there's nowhere to hang out. I don't know how we got down this rabbit trail, but there's nowhere to hang out. Everybody knows everything. So if anything goes down in the town, like if you get a speeding ticket, everybody knows about it. It's just be incredibly annoying. You have to drive. I know from experience that you have to drive 45 minutes to get to a Walmart or a Lowe's.
Wow.
Which is just crazy. And then so like we would be doing construction on my dad's house, and we would go to Lowe's, and we would forget like a screw.
Oh gosh, that is the worst.
Yeah, I learned some new vocabulary that day.
Right. My in-laws have a cabin out in the mountains near Taos, and it's about 35 minutes outside of Taos.
Where's Taos?
In New Mexico.
Okay.
Yeah, northern New Mexico in the mountains. It's a ski place, and it's real close to places like Angel Fire and I don't know what else is out there.
Angel Fire.
Yeah, that's a great name in it.
That's awesome.
But it's about 45 minutes from Santa Fe. Mm-hmm. That's the big city. But yeah, the closest Walmart, closest hardware store, closest everything is in Taos. At least that's reliable. Yeah. And that 35 minutes, and you when you have that scenario, man, you have to plan, because if you forget one thing, that's not fun.
Right.
And there's a town on the other side of the mountain called Mora. And that's one of those that has like, I don't know, 1,000 people. Mm-hmm. And they do have a grocery store. They do have a hardware store. But New Mexico does not work like the rest of the world. And and those people who've lived in New Mexico know this, because it's almost like third world mentality in a first world country.
Yeah.
Because they'll just take off whenever they want and just close shop, and they won't tell anyone. They won't put any signs out, and so it's like Thursday at 2:00, which is business hours, and you'll take this effort to drive into Mora, which is in the opposite direction of Taos. So if you go to Mora, you're committed to going to Mora.
You're right.
And you get there and it's closed. You're like, well,
Thursday at 2:00. Do they have the "we'll be back at this amount of time" sign, or do they have the
maybe? Yeah. Or, you'll get stuck in traffic because the town decides to shut down for a parade. And they'll shut down for hours, and no signs, no warning, nothing. You're just stuck.
Yeah.
That's
great.
So, they talk about one of the times they were visiting where they ran out of milk. And so they were they were eating cereal, and they were using heavy cream instead of milk.
Oh, jeez.
They said it was delicious.
Heavy whipping cream, actually.
Yeah.
But think about
They said it was awesome.
Think about what you're putting inside of your body, though. I mean, heavy whipping cream. What is it, like 50 grams of sugar inside of this, or do they just not care?
Well, I mean, it's lactose sugar, so it's not. I mean, we're not talking like straight sugar, but
Still,
plus
I'll have to try it. Thanks.
for real. When you're on vacation, are you really monitoring sugar intake?
No.
I mean, if you are, you're doing it wrong.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah. I don't know. I think my goal for vacation is, and then we got to talk about music stuff. But
Do we?
yeah, no, we don't. Music. What was I saying? So whenever I go on vacation, I always try to plan to do the healthy stuff so that when vacation hits, I can do whatever I want.
Oh yeah, wheels off.
Yeah, after vacation, I go back right into whatever I was doing before. But,
Yeah.
yeah.
We did a trip to Hawaii one year. We were there for a week, and I think we spent like $1,500 on food. Mm-hmm. Now think about that, $1,500 just for the two of us on
Two
food
people.
for a week.
That's crazy.
What was it? $200 a day. I mean, we ate good.
It's worth it though.
Oh, it was so good.
When I went to Florida in particular, man, they know Pensacola Beach. They know they're a tourist town. So
yeah,
you'll go there and just for yourself, it'll be $30.
Yeah,
at least. If not more. I dropped a ton of cash that week that I went there. Anyway,
speaking of food, this shirt that I'm wearing, like I have some buttons that are just like holding on for dear life down here. I can't stand that.
But it's
dress
a
shirts.
Beautiful blue.
Well, thank you, and it does show.
It's
up
a
on the
royal
camera.
rising blue.
Right, or a blue hawk blue.
No, it's
Definitely not. But yeah, God, and so like this particular shirt, I feel like I have to dye it before I wear it because I'm afraid.
Are you dieting right now?
No, I didn't do laundry, so this is what was left. But like I have this button that is just holding on for dear life, and so I'll get in the car to drive because when you sit down, obviously like things kind of, it's fat people problems.
We have gone from Socrates and Plato to just farting, mouth farting into the microphone.
And so I'll sit in my car and drive places, and I'll just unbutton these like belly buttons.
You will not.
And I just
no.
Dude, I am classy.
Jeez, dude. All right. I got to watch out whenever I'm hanging out with you. Okay. So today's topic is you wanted to hit me with the Socratic Method, but you already have.
Have I?
Did you do that with the bad question? Yes. Is there such thing as a bad question? And then you hit me with this thing. Or is there such thing as a good question? So
that is true. I did hit you Socratically with that.
But you said you wanted to do it with today's topic. So what is today's topic? Ready?
Well, okay. I'm gonna kind of lead through it. I don't want to necessarily title it. I mean, I guess. Well, I mean, we need to title the episode. So
thank you. Podcast producer thanks you.
Why do we do this? How's that?
Got it. Check.
Why? So okay. I just came off of 2 16-hour workdays.
So mathematically, that would be
So before
32 hours.
Before Wednesday starts, I've logged 32 hours for the week. So I always laugh at people. They're like, "I work 40 hours this week." I'm like, "That's Wednesday for me," and not by the end of Wednesday. That's like mid Wednesday.
Yeah.
Anyway, people are just okay. I'm gonna stop because I could say bad things.
If you're a millennial or a Gen Zer and you think you're gonna work 40 hours a week and get by.
You maybe
particularly
get by,
in your 20s. Well, I'm sorry. Yeah, I guess I shouldn't say get by. I should say
excel
and get ahead.
Right.
And if you want to, it'd be tough to work 40 hours. I mean, 40 hours is nothing, dude.
I can't remember the last time I worked only 40 hours in a week.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds like vacation. That's vacation. Well, not really, but
did you work in high school?
Yeah, right at the end of high school.
Yeah, because if you're working in high school, like for me, my high school was I was at school at 7:30, and I was there until about 3, and then I went to work at Chick-fil-A. So that's like a warm up to what I was going to do with my life. Just instead of school in the morning, I just work.
Right.
So
do you going back to you, what does your average week look like as far as work?
So we're taking right now, myself and the percussion director and one other person, we're doing martial arts classes in the morning.
Really?
Yeah, 6 a.m.
What percussion guy?
Kevin Hanneran.
Very cool.
I've never known how to say his last name.
Hanrahan, I think.
Okay, so yeah, him. So he and I were taking classes at 6 in the morning every morning. So that's not work, but it's something to do.
Right.
And so outside of that, I'm doing about 7 to 6 every day. And then I'll run trash intermittently from, like, these next 2 weeks. I'm probably going to be running every single night from 8 until about 10.
Right.
So that's 13 hours. And then on Saturday, I'll teach from like 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock in the morning until about 1.
Right.
And then Sunday, I'll probably be running again from 8 until about 11.
So you work a lot.
Yes.
So, okay, let's take out the trash business, because we'll just say that that's a separate entity in your life. The music side, I mean, you're still pulling a lot of hours. You said 7 a.m. to 6 p.m.?
Yep.
Monday through Friday?
Yes, with time for, I did intentionally give myself time to eat.
Okay.
So it's not Mr. Lee 7 to 6.
Right. Gosh. I don't know how he does
27
it.
students in one day.
If we can get past his accent, he would be a great interview.
Oh yeah. But he's also a crazy good jokester too.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. He's got a concert coming up, by the way, Sunday, October 13th
this Sunday.
This Sunday at Prosper High School, right? Mm-hmm. Do you have the time? Is it 6? I think he said 6.
The Dallas Asian Wind Ensemble, I guess is what they're calling themselves.
I think, yeah, with some white people on the side.
Dawei.
That kind of does sound a little like you're coming into peace with yourself.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, we work a lot.
Why do you do this? I mean, why? I mean, is it? I guess better question is do you feel like this is worth it?
Yes, and I actually have that. I pose that question in my brain a lot because I'm getting to a point in my life where I don't necessarily have to. Obviously, because other businesses are doing well, so
right.
And it's a weird dynamic because initially, whenever you do create something else, all you can think about is like, man, I'm going to get out of that. Mm-hmm. And then you actually put yourself into the reality of, hey, what if tomorrow you don't get up and you don't teach any lessons whatsoever? And it kind of gave me this really sinking feeling, like this really like low down feeling of, man, I don't know that I want to stop.
Yeah. So you feel like you get some meaning from it?
Yes, like a ton of meaning out of it. I know I do because there, and I would like to get your perspective on this as well, but we talked about the island theory, right? The 20, 60, 20. Perhaps not on the podcast, but we've talked about the island theory together.
Probably.
Yeah. It's not everybody feels this way or makes me feel this way, but a lot of the times my top kiddos, meaning the kiddos who didn't necessarily have to be in the top band, but the ones that have made a change in their life from the day they started working with me. Mm-hmm. Like those give me so much, and I know this, they don't have to tell me this, right? And I can name a bunch of students right now, particularly since I got to Prosper in Frisco, but seeing them make a change in their life, and not because of like I'm doing anything amazingly great, but I think in that first lesson or the first couple of weeks, my ability to speak into them and cast a vision for who they could be in their lives, out inside and outside of trombone, I don't know any other outlet that I can do that, because once you get into the adult world, nobody wants to hear stuff like that unless they're like probably pretty significantly younger than you. But these kids who come to me who are 12 years old, 13 years old, and I tell them, hey, dude, you could be the best trombone player that Prosper's ever seen.
Right.
and they have that spark in their eyes, and they get lit up about it, and for years and years and years on end, they're just super, super inspired, and they want to practice.
Right.
And it's not, like we say all the time, it's not about just practice. It's about, hey, if you want to be great at anything in your life, this is what it's going to take. And being able to teach them that through a musical instrument, and we could go into the whole how your brain develops in a different way whenever you learn a musical instrument. But yeah, I mean, it's a sad thing in my head to process, like, hey, you might not be able to create that spark anymore, at least to these kids through the thing that, I remember I was talking to a kid yesterday. I remember my first lesson with Mr. Fife.
Mm-hmm.
It was in the black box at LD Bell High School. We played Ruby.
Right.
And he said this same exact thing to me back in 2006, way back when, right? But he told me the exact same thing. And it's so strange to me that I remember that moment in time, because I don't remember really much of anything else outside of that from my middle school life.
Right.
But I remember that lesson when he basically told me that, if you want to, you could be one of the best that Bell's ever seen. And you could go on, and then that led on to going to U of H, and it's just all been this crazy winding path to now. And then I put that in perspective for me now. It's like, I'm in the middle of this process with these kiddos right now. I don't know. I could name off some students right now that they're going to look back and they're going to be like, I remember my first lesson with Nobles.
Yeah.
And their life is going to be this crazy winding path to where they're at right now. And it's just this constant circle. So that's where I find the meaning. And if you want to look at it as like, hey, you're just a private lessons teacher, then that's your choice. But that's not the way that I see it.
So do you find more meaning in teaching or in the actual fine arts?
It's got to be through the fine arts.
So you don't think you would have as much meaning if you taught history or
No.
English or math or anything?
Nope.
So that's interesting, because then you got to ask yourself why.
Right.
Yeah,
and I think the reason is it's hard to, and I'm sure somebody could argue with me on this, but I think it's hard to be creative with things like history that you well, I say you can't reinterpret the past, but you can, obviously. And then with mathematics, it's hard to get artsy about how 2 + 2 = 4.
right.
And I think that, absolutely you can be inspirational to people, and you can say, hey, you could be a great mathematician. But for the most part, it's hard for you to be creative in any other subject besides in art.
So I just finished reading a book, and I think I've mentioned it before on this podcast. It's called Poetic Knowledge, and it's not about poetry, but it's about a mode of thinking that is more experiential and creative rather than and the best way to understand that is to compare that to scientific knowledge, where how do they say that? Poetic knowledge is the thing that actually makes thinks up the idea for an invention. Scientific knowledge creates it. And so,
Okay.
I guess it kind of goes into what you were saying, is that there's two modes of thinking, and the arts kind of hits a different way of thinking.
Right.
And
I have to be that way. I can't. My problem, I don't think it's a problem. My mental process is, you put me in a box, I'm going to try to get out of that box.
Yeah.
Oh, there's another box, I'll get out.
Yeah.
And anytime somebody tells me something definitively, probably my first thought is, well, hold on. Especially if it's a process-based thing.
Right.
Like, you have to do this way. I immediately start trying to think of a better way to do it.
Yeah.
Which ties, now that I'm thinking about it, ties really well into music, because first thing I'll tell somebody is, hey, even now when I'm talking to students, right? And there's a reason why I'm the teacher, they're the student. But I'll say, hey, I think it's really effective this way, but I'll always say, if you have a way to play it that's different than that, if you can convince me of that, I am open.
Right.
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 Which, it's hard to say that when you're teaching somebody the quadratic formula.
Yeah.
You can't change the quadratic formula. It
Yeah.
is the quadratic formula. You can't become creative with it. But I guess that's what you're talking about with the scientific brain.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so. So I would argue that probably all the arts are kind of in this vein. Would you agree with that?
Yep.
Right. It's not just a music thing.
Nope.
It just happens to be that music is our vehicle.
I think theater is the only one that I can think of that maybe now you do have expression, but and I could be so wrong about this, but I think it's a little bit more black and white. I think with music now, I say that when you give somebody a solo, they can't just play whatever they want; they have to play what's on the page.
Right.
So maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't know, but I think generally the arts are what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
So
what to you? Or did you have a question?
You can go ahead.
To you, what makes something an art? See, I got the questions.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're great questions. I mean, it makes you think. And I think if anybody who would just go bam and answer, it probably doesn't have very good introspective thinking.
Or maybe even a different way to hit it is what does art do? Not just art, like visual art, but like the arts. What does it actually do?
So the generic cookie cutter Instagram answer would be the arts bypass the brain and go into the heart.
That's cute.
I've probably seen a bunch of Instagram, but I think it goes to a different part of the brain. I mean, I know it goes to a different part of the brain. I don't know exactly which part of the brain, but you have your emotional brain and then your rational brain.
Right.
And I think that in this life, there's a lot of opportunity to exercise the rational brain, not a ton of opportunity to exercise the emotional side of your brain, which I think whenever you get into music, I think to me, I love it because I think it's like a perfect balance in my life. So what makes something an art? I think it's something that activates that emotional side of the brain.
Mm-hmm.
And can you start to use rationale? I think you have to, but I don't know that we have a choice over this, but I think it's your emotional brain has to be activated first. Like your perception about any piece or any piece of art or any play is you immediately go to you make the emotional assessment and then you start to use logic. Mm-hmm. Like, how does this make me feel? Because you can't when if we were to experience something like an earthquake or something, that's obviously not going to happen in Texas. But if you're in California and everything starts shaking, the first thought isn't going to be, I wonder what's going on here. It's like, oh, geez, there's an earthquake going on. And it's emotional. And
my gosh, the tectonic plates are shifting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not happening.
So you have the emotional brain first. I think that's really, I genuinely believe that's how we perceive everything that we hear, particularly within the confines of the art.
So I think a critic to that would say, well, why are we developing emotions? I mean, isn't that what gets people in trouble? Or is it that it's deeper than emotion, and maybe that's just what you're calling it, or maybe there's...
Well, what would you call it?
Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it goes back to that book that I was talking about, Poetic Knowledge. It's the poetic mode of thinking.
Yes.
So it's experiential or transcendent, maybe.
Yeah.
Inspirational. I mean, I think all of those kind of go... Maybe those are...
Yeah,
those play together.
inspirational. I think inspirational is a good word because it's very hard for... well, I don't know.
If you look at... Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say I just think about... I'm always juxtaposing right now. Like, while we're talking about this, I'm trying to juxtapose arts with... I think math is the most don't get outside of this box kind of thing. Unless you are at the upper echelon of mathematics, then you can start to kind of branch out. But until you've learned thing A through Z, don't even start working on thing double A.
Right.
But I think from the very beginning, kiddos have to immediately go into you can inspire a kid as a sixth grader to branch out on their own within the, like, I like to think of the kids as in like when you first have a puppy, you give them a playpen, and they feel like they're exploring,
Yeah.
but you're always watching them. You're always making sure they're inside of that playpen. Like, oh, hey, you just played that note on this partial. Why don't you go to second position or press down your second valve and see if you can play the same note there? And then their brain goes, oh, I wonder if I can do that.
Yeah.
And that's, to me, that's the whole inspirational side of it. And it starts immediately, which I think is pretty unique, because other than that, I think a lot of times in other subjects, it's very, here's the book, read the book.
Yeah.
I love that we don't have textbooks to read. The kids get a break from textbooks. Anyways, that was just a side point.
So, you look at the word music, and one of the roots for that is the word muse. And so if you get a musical education, I mean, you could say, okay, well, it's musical education, musical.
Right.
And so, we look at what is a muse. Well, that is let me ask you.
I don't know what a muse is.
Well,
I know what amusing is.
No, right. So I'm reading the Odyssey because I'm a nerd. And so whenever you read the epic poems, or if you read Shakespeare, there's always a muse. And that is a divine inspiration.
So it's like a character. Does it have to be a character, or is it a thing, like the divine inspiration?
It could be both.
Okay.
And so divine, people just thought, oh, they're getting to religion. Well, not necessarily, because I think it is something outside of yourself that inspires you. I think that's really what it means. But like the Odyssey, it begins with Apollo. No. It begins with Athena, the other A god, and not to be confused with Ares, another A god. So anyway, okay, I
got to get into these books in my 30s, because I am so behind on these. All the books that you're talking about.
They're hard. They're really hard, I think. But when you unpack them, it's like, good Lord, there's so much there. Yeah, yeah. And people talked about Homer as being the greatest writer outside of Shakespeare. Wow. And you read the Iliad or the Odyssey for the first time, you're like, okay, I don't understand why he's a great writer, because it's like, okay, I mean, it's
is it pretty basic, I guess?
Well, no, it's a compelling story, but it's written a lot like, I mean, if you ever read the Bible, it's written so that not only is there a story involved, but there's also record keeping. So especially the Iliad, which is one long battle. It's the sack of Troy, and it's a 10-year long battle. Imagine fighting not a war, a battle for 10 years. And then
it's freaking crazy.
Yeah, and then it ends with Odysseus creating the horse that everyone gets in, and then, they present it as a gift. The Trojan horse that we talk about. So anyway, what was I saying? Yeah, so it's written like the Bible in that there's a lot of record keeping. So they'll say, okay, Ajax went and fought against this person and slew this person and this person and this person and this person, and this person fought with him, and they used this spear and this sword, and it's like, oh gosh, there's so much detail here. It
sounds like when I was reading Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
I got midway through the third book and I couldn't do it anymore. It was like reading the lineage in Genesis. I was like, when is this going to stop?
Yeah. Those are hard parts.
Yeah.
But, if you get someone who really knows their stuff, they can unpack that. Even, going to Genesis, the lineage, to us, it's like, okay, this person begat that person who begat that person. I don't care.
Right.
Until you get a Jewish scholar in there that unpacks it and says, well, here's why this is meaningful.
Right.
And then you're like, oh, that's why it's there. So anyway, okay, I've gotten way off what I was talking about. The idea of a muse. The Odyssey begins with Athena, and she is the muse for the Odyssey, and she's talking to Zeus about, hey, Odysseus has left the Battle of Troy, and he is stuck on this island, and he can't get home. He's wanting to get home. He spent another 10 years trying to get home from this 10-year battle, so he's been away for 20 years.
Yeah.
And she says to Zeus, we've forgotten about Odysseus. Can we help him get home? And Zeus says, go ahead and you help him go get home. And so Athena is the guide the entire way. She's the divine inspiration for Odysseus to finally get home. And she also guides Odysseus' son, who's waiting for him, Telemachus. And that's a whole another part of the story that's pretty amazing. And I don't want to get too far into the Odyssey, but that idea of a muse, well, that's the root of the word music.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
The when you said muse, the first thing I thought was, okay, so we're going into music, or muzak, as Mr. Alstrom put it.
Right.
So, 1 second.
You look at the ancient academies of Greece. I hope people find this interesting. I do.
They should, yeah.
I start talking about ancient Greece, and I could just see people going, serving in the Greek polis.
That's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
That
So
lottery.
you weren't elected. You were selected. So it's early democracy. So there's some issues with it, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And there's actually issues with all democracy, but we're not going to get into government. Anyway, back to this. And by the way, America's not a democracy.
It is a
Republic. And to the republic for which it stands.
Oh.
Okay, back to this. So, but because every male could potentially be a governing official, they took education unbelievably serious, and they wanted to make sure that an idiot wasn't in charge of their well, it wasn't really a country, but their populace, because that could really screw things up for them.
Right.
And so they would forcibly educate. And so there were some issues there, but there were two things that they would educate boys in. The first one was gymnastics. And it wasn't gymnastics as we think, like the Olympics gymnastics, but it was just the training of the body. And then it was in music, which was the training of the soul. Those were the first two things that they said were important. And it wasn't music as in like, I'm going to sing a song. It was the training in all things that are inspirational. And so you could think that there were probably all of the arts were included in that. It's interesting.
Yeah, that's like, it's really I think we kind of do that. Well, we don't do it forcibly, but we sort of do that anyway. Isn't there sort of, there's some kind of law in Texas that you have to take in art? Is that right? Get an art credit? At least in middle school.
Yeah, to get a high school diploma, to be accredited, you do have to have fine arts. I think it's just a year of it, though.
Yeah. So it's kind of like you have to dabble your toes in it at least a little bit.
Right. And, so the average student who doesn't play an instrument or doesn't dance or doesn't do drama, they just take an art class and they make a little mud sculpture and they just say, yeah, I did art. And so, not that that's not valuable. I think it can go deeper.
Yeah, I think that we were talking about motivation earlier. Like, why do we still want to do this, and why is it important to do that? Like, why the arts? And I think you're doing a really good job of explaining kind of the origins of, or probably the origins. I don't know if there's anything before Athens that has to do with the development of the arts.
Well, I mean, there's been art in all cultures.
Right.
You go back thousands of years of ancient Egypt. Obviously, they've got the hieroglyphics, and so it's always been there.
Yeah. It's just I guess we tend to take, being in the Western world, the roots in Athens.
Right.
And yeah. So they...
So that... Oh, you had a question.
Well, yeah,
Go ahead.
so I was going to ask you, how much of that do you think is a cultural thing? Because as much as we, like in our own world, we are very cultural, like we have a lot of art stuff going on.
Right.
We live in it every single day. I feel like culturally it's sort of an uphill battle because the passion here in the United States is not with music.
Right.
I think it should, I obviously think it should be. And I just think that the perception around music and the arts is a little down. Also, I'll say the downtown Dallas as opposed to
Right, hipster.
Yeah, it's a little coffee shop.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to try to pin whose fault that is on it, but I think, and I go back to this all the time.
I can pin whose fault it is.
Okay.
I think I can do it in a way that's not crazy controversial.
Okay. Well, I was just going to say that every time I expose somebody to what I'm passionate about, because they find out that I'm a classical musician, and they ask me they ask you what you can play. If they don't do anything in the arts, they ask you what you can play. And then they'll hear that like trombone is my primary. And if they'll allow me, if we're hanging out in my vehicle or whatever, I'll play them a piece of music, and they're like, that is cool.
Yeah.
And perhaps they're just acquiescing because they don't want to be awkward and giving me their real opinion. But I don't think that's the case, because you can see when people are being genuine and when they're not.
Yeah.
But anyway, so you said that you could pin it on somebody.
Yeah. I mean, the
some
reason why
people.
the arts are perceived the way that they are is because of the of the education system that we're in. And this is not a slam on teachers. This is just how education has developed over time. Back before 1900, we were in a liberal arts education. And notice the key word there, arts. It was a liberal arts education. And so
that's an entire system and method.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that develops out of the medieval education system, the university. And liberal didn't mean like politically liberal. It meant that you're freeing your mind up. You're studying these art forms in order to free your mind for greater thinking.
Right.
And then we had the introduction of the Prussian education system, which is out of Germany. And that is one of the education systems that inspired people like Karl Marx. Okay. And so the education system there is, instead of freeing the mind to cultivate wisdom and virtue, as we used to do, it's now train people in disciplines so that they can go get a job. And
that makes sense, because if you think about you've read the studies on classical music attendance in the 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s. Yeah, it's wild. I mean, it was like going to the symphony was like going to the finals or going to the Super Bowl. Right. Except you got a bunch of Super Bowls.
Because of this system, what's valued are the things that get you jobs. So, let's go study engineering. Let's go study, programming or things like that, because, that is easy to say. If I just go get a job or go major in computer science, I can be an IT person and I can get a job that pays X $1,000s a year and piece of cake, done. Right. Rather than making the argument of, if I really contemplate the great ideas throughout time, I can become wise and then do anything. And it's two different modes of thinking. Yeah. But because we're in the Prussian system where it trains you for jobs, that means that the people who are artists are actually counterculture to that. And so when you start looking at counterculture, well, now you're thinking of like hippie type things. Right. They rebel in a way that is not helpful. Right. Because they look weird, they act weird, and they like to spray paint buildings in their areas, and not like graffiti, but splashes of rainbows and things like that.
Right. So it's one of those things where, and just understanding the human psyche, where, okay, I think once you establish the way that you think, like if you think football is the greatest thing that's ever happened to mankind, the second that somebody who's different, that you see different than you, comes in and tries to tell you that you're wrong, your first initial reaction is, I got to defend my position. Yep. And then you just get these, and it's very, very, very difficult. The second somebody feels like they're being attacked, they're probably not going to change their position, which is why I just don't like talking politics with anybody. Right. That I know I don't agree with, to an extent. if you're a rational person and we can have a conversation about it, let's do it. I'm so game for it, and I think people should do that more often. Problem is, I feel like nowadays it's hard to find people that are like that.
Yep.
So if you were to try to come at me and tell me in the same vein, if you were to try to come at me and tell me that the arts are stupid and that, you know, you're training a bunch of wussies, they should be in football to man up or
Right.
whatever, I would just immediately go into probably defense mode about, well, or actually I'd probably start questioning them, just start throwing questions at them.
Isn't it funny how many times in the arts, or teaching people in the arts, we tell our students to, I don't say man up, but that is the sentiment.
Right.
Hey, you know, tough it out.
Tough it out. Yeah.
Practice. Don't be a little wuss.
Right.
We don't say that literally, but that, you know, that does happen a lot.
Yeah. We say the same thing.
But in the arts, isn't that amazing?
Yeah, I think it is. And dude, I am 100% positive that there were times, you know, when Mozart's dad was talking to Mozart, he probably said something along the same lines.
Yeah.
Just probably maybe in a different way. But
anyway, I interrupted your point. Go ahead.
no, I think we're running out of time. We've been talking our heads off. So we're coming up on, but we have that one light, you know what I'm talking about?
Right.
So,
just to kind of wrap it up a little bit, I firmly believe that it's the study of the arts that will save the world.
I think it has to be.
It's not going to be. I think math is important. I really do, and I think science is important. I don't think we're teaching it great, but that's a whole other subject. Because I think that it should look more toward the order that's around us rather than, hey, 2 + 2 = 4.
Right.
But the arts are still pure in the idea that it does force students to get in front of things that are inspiring and things that are great. And it forces them to contemplate, what does this mean? And, you know, it's becoming more and more important as, you know, maybe English programs are abandoning some of the great literature in favor of the popular literature.
Yep.
Because, you know, you're going, okay, well, now we're not contemplating as many great ideas in a literature class. Or we're doing like a... I'm going there. We do a PC version of history.
Sure.
You know, so okay, well, we're not contemplating, because we're trying to tiptoe around maybe hard things. We're not contemplating the meaning behind history,
Right.
and so we're losing that in a lot of places. And the arts, man, they still have it
Right.
if we stay there, and I think it's so important.
Well, I think the whole tiptoeing thing, or just being the question should not be, is this difficult or is this hard?
Right.
Is this a challenge? I think it should be mentally stimulating, mentally challenging, and I think it should also be something where it's like there always will be people who will come out on top and people who don't come out on top.
Mm-hmm.
And that's got to be okay, because that's just the way the world was structured, I think. Now, I think if anybody, and I know this because I've read Malcolm Gladwell, if anybody wants to achieve, they can.
Mm-hmm.
In music, I have to, the second we start saying that other people can't be better than other people, or you're not allowed to push kids like that anymore, because what's this other kid going to think if Johnny can do this? That's when I'm going to have to call it quits.
Yeah.
And be like, I'm out. But like you said, the arts, the competitive aspect of it, I love the competitive aspect of the arts. I don't think that should be everything, but I think that's what inspires most people to get better.
Yeah, well, and even competition with themselves, because
Yes.
you can't get. We have an end goal of perfection, and you can't get there.
Right.
You cannot. But that's not what's important. It's the process of pursuing it.
Yep.
That's where the learning happens, and it's just like you read Dante. I am so nerdy right now, but Dante's Divine Comedy. He goes through the Inferno, hell. He goes to Purgatory. And he goes to Paradiso, heaven, and in the transition between going from Purgatory into Paradise, he has to walk through he has to walk through fire. Imagine that.
That
To
makes
get
sense.
to paradise, you have to walk through fire. And so it's the struggle, it's the process that's important.
Yep. I think that's true 100%. That I can't think of a thing that I've done significant in my life that I didn't feel like I had to do something that could be described as walking through fire. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like watching a Netflix show, you don't have to walk through fire to do that.
No.
I think it's a perfect cap to the show for now. We can come back to this later. We've got a slew of guests coming up.
Yeah.
So just be on the lookout for those. We're going to release them week by week by week. So, and then if we can, we'll slip in an episode where it's just us two.
Cool.
But
Hopefully people found some meaning in this. I mean, I know it's a lot of philosophy, but I think
I think if you're listening to us,
Man, I
you
think this is important.
probably we have some pretty regular. We have some regulars now. I get people texting me probably once a week saying like, "Hey, dude, didn't know you had a podcast. Really enjoyed listening to it." And I'm like, people are listening. So yeah, share it with other people if you feel so inclined, and we would really, really, really appreciate it.
yeah, send some questions. 5-star ratings on iTunes really helps a lot.
Any band memes? We're still trying to get. I've got so many middle schoolers. I think it's really hard for middle school boys to commit to anything. They're like, I've got all these band memes I'm going to send you right now, and then I never get them.
Right.
So, anyways, we will be back next week with a guest, and then probably a guest after that, and a guest after that. We've got a lot of people on the docket that we want to book. So
Cool.
it's just marching season, man. It's Bandtober.
Bandtober.
Yeah. All right. Peace.